Hey everybody, Preston Poulter here with Pocket Jacks Comics, and I got some exciting stuff to announce today, particularly for the future of White Lily, issue 3 and 4, and on into the future. I have reached a tentative agreement. You know, these things are always fluid, but with YouTuber Eric July, Young Rip at 42, I believe is his YouTube name. He and I were friends because we're both from Dallas, or at least I should say associates, and we met at libertarian functions because we're both kind of politically that way. And his YouTube following just blew up, and he looked over and saw what other people were doing with their YouTube following, and was like, "Hey, I should get into the comics thing." And he knew I was already there. I was already making comics that he liked, and so we were kind of working out a deal where he's going to promote for me to his over 100,000 followers, and I'm going to help him in terms of navigating the comic world and finding artists and translating script breakdowns of stuff for his own comics. So potentially that is a win-win. I'm very excited about that. The launch for White Lily issue 3 coming up is going to be May the 9th, so mark your calendars for that one. Subscribe to me on Kickstarter so you'll get the notice when it happens. I wanted to talk a bit about the Mark Waid deposition. There have been a couple of videos about it. What I found interesting about them is that they missed the big moment. Like, if they would have been live, like sitting there at that deposition, they missed the big moment. And I've been on a lot of depositions. I've been deposed twice, but it was over multiple days. One time it was just 8 hours of me being deposed, and then come back, and then there's another 4 hours. So and then that was interesting. And then I've attended a number of other people's depositions. So probably in terms of deposition experience, I probably got like 100, probably north of that in terms of either being deposed or attending people's depositions, writing down questions that should be asked, that kind of stuff. And I've been in litigation, and for that matter, I'm also in law school. So I have I'm not a deposition expert, but I'm kind of more than a layperson in terms of level of experience. And there are certain moments that you're looking for. All right, one, you're never gonna get the Perry Mason confessional.
Mrs. Balfour, did you not kill your husband?
You got me. That's a good point. You're right, I did do it. They're never going to say that. Their lawyer ahead of time will, or at least should, have already counseled them in terms of what's kind of at work against them and what the case is and kind of where the trouble spots are and the things they need to avoid, the sensitive topics. So, and ultimately depositions, it's the goal of a deposition, as by a book I will recommend. It's pretty expensive, but if you're going into a deposition, you definitely need to read it. Winning at Deposition, it is a great book, and it goes over 3 big depositions: Bill Clinton's, O.J. Simpson's in the civil trial, and Bill Gates. And it goes and shows like answers that they gave that were bad, and like how this was not going to play out in front of a jury. And that's what you're looking for in a deposition. You're looking for a bad answer, and you want someone to keep expanding upon a bad answer that just makes them look foolish, and it ruins their credibility. So let's kind of drill down on the specific case here. We've got Mark Waid, whose credibility is already starting off a little rough because his lawyer, Mr. Zaid, I believe his name is, does not want the case tried in Texas because Texas apparently has some looser laws when it comes to tortious interference and defamation than does New York. So they have filed a motion to dismiss, and the counter-argument to the motion to dismiss from Richard C. Meyer's attorney is that, well, there was a defamatory statement which took place in Texas. And so Mark Waid filed a sworn statement, kind of under penalty of perjury. Hey, I absolutely did not say anything defamatory about Richard C. Meyer in Texas. I totally didn't do that. And then, the rumblings of the internet, people are like, well, what about that time at this Comic-Con where he specifically called Richard C. Meyer a white supremacist? And then Mark Waid apparently goes, oh yeah, there was that. All right. Now keep in mind, right? I've never known anybody to be brought up on criminal perjury charges for making a obviously false statement on sworn deposition. All it does is just ruin your credibility. So Mark Waid already kind of has stepped in a little bit in terms of his credibility, and he makes a sworn statement of, I did never do that. I don't even know. Where's Texas on a map? And then they're like, hey, didn't you say this at, this Comic-Con? I think it was like Wizard World Austin or something like that. And he's like, oh yeah. All right, well, maybe I said that, but it wasn't really, like, defamatory. Like, I wasn't calling Richard C. Meyer a white supremacist. And this is where it's interesting, because we have a recording of him saying a thing, and then over the course of the deposition, they're asking him, like, so, this is you in the recording, right? And this written statement here that we've written out, where we transcribed the deposition, or we've transcribed what you said, that seems to be accurate according to this recording, which we're going to play for you now. And, that's where, because when you're there in the witness chair, you don't want to admit to anything. But at the same time, you don't want to say you know nothing, because, well, then you look bad. So you want to go, hey, is this what you said? Well, I don't remember. That was such a long time ago. Okay, we're going to play a recording for you then. Boom. Does that sound like you? And then what are you going to say? Like, no, that doesn't sound like you. You're going to go, yeah, that basically sounds like me. Okay. And the words that you heard in this recording are the words that are on the printed page in front of you, right? Yeah, pretty much. So then that seems to be an accurate, an accurate transcript of what you said. And then, you've kind of backed them into this corner where they have to validate, what the written statement was. So this whole thing turns on a con which happened in Comicpalooza, which I'm going to be at next year. Sorry to close it out for this year, but next year I'm going, which is down in Houston, and this was 2018. Shame I missed it. So the audience member asked, I just want to get your quick opinion, turned out his opinion was not so quick, about small comic book creators like this guy we've been hearing about on Twitter, diversity in comics, big-time creators like yourself, Marvel. He seems obsessed with breaking into the scene. I'm trying to figure out, what's your opinion, obsession? And then Mark Waid goes in, it's tough to answer, because I'm trying to, you don't want to give too much oxygen to toxic people. But what he's basically talking about there is just as there are in pop, I mean, right in the world, not just in comic books, but in the world, you got heavily, male-heavy movements of guys who are trying to move things back towards white supremacy, or back towards a world in which women knew their place, that kind of nonsense. And they're the Proud Boys, or they're this group, or they're that group. And then, he goes on to talk about Antarctic Press and whatnot, but the rest of that is kind of superfluous. The real meat of the answer is right there, where he's specifically talking about diversity in comics, Richard C. Meyer, and his answer is linking him to white supremacy of, there are these guys. And the strange thing is, his answer there at Comicpalooza is not that, well, Richard C. Meyer specifically is a white supremacist, but that, well, there are these guys on the internet, who believe in white supremacy. But why would he be bringing that up in an answer specifically about diversity in comics, Richard C. Meyer, right? Why would you do that? And so Richard C. Meyer's attorney is kind of pressing him on that, and ultimately we get this gorgeous answer that, like I said, up until now I haven't seen anybody really talk about, which is, do you have any evidence that Richard C. Meyer is a white supremacist? And, if you come out and make a statement of, no, I don't have any evidence that Richard C. Meyer is a white supremacist, but I did make that statement essentially saying he was, well, now you're in kind of hot water, right? That's not good. You don't want to, now you have a Perry Mason moment, or you don't want one of those. So instead, Mr. Waid kind of does a classic lefty trick of, let's change the definition of what white supremacy is and kind of introduce it as a very broad spectrum. So let me read you this answer. So finally we get Mr. Byrne, the attorney for Richard C. Meyer, asking the real question here, what I consider the highlight of the deposition. Do you have any basis to substantiate a contention that Mr. Meyer is a white supremacist? And then we get an objection from Waid's attorney object to form, which I find kind of absurd. That means that the question is unclear, and therefore the witness's answer, he might be answering something else that the jury might later misconstrue. But that answer is very clear. You can answer it yes or no. Do you have any basis to substantiate a contention that Mr. Myers is a white supremacist? You can just go, no. And then it's very clear what you said. Or, yes, and it's very clear what you said. So that is a superfluous objection to form, in my humble opinion. And then the witness goes, I would say in the materials I provided the court is various social media posts about how, it's not, and by the way, classic bad answers where you're just kind of digging yourself a hole, have a lot of knows and 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 ooh. So I love this one. Various social media posts about how, it's not the one about the, it's not, what a sideshow or circus, whatever. When you hire black people for comics, that sort of thing, it's there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. What's he saying? Yeah, absolutely to? I think what he's saying is what I'm going to piece together. But again, this is where now I'm having to piece together Mr. Waid's answer. I believe he's saying, yeah, absolutely, in reference to, do you have anything to substantiate Mr. Myers' contention? He's like, well, he did say that maybe comics is a circus and that we're hiring black people just because they're black, which therefore makes him a white supremacist. As he goes on to say, at least indicated a propensity towards what we refer to as white supremacy these days. Not the white supremacy of yonder year, these days white supremacy. Back in the old days, there was burning crosses and hoods and all kinds of things. These days, it's, the occasional Twitter post against, Kwanzaa. That's white supremacy. It's a pretty broad spectrum. All right. I love that. White supremacy is a broad spectrum. We have, Hitler, and then down here we have PewDiePie, and, somewhere in the middle, that's Richard C. Meyer. I mean, he's not exactly a white supremacist. I'd give him maybe a 2. That's my favorite answer, right? That one's not going to play well in front of a jury. So, I thought that was pretty entertaining. I thought I would share it with you. The reason I wanted to talk about this is, there aren't a lot of high-profile litigations involving comics, and specifically small comic creators. So this is kind of a circus for us all to sit around and eat popcorn too. Anyway, I will catch you guys in the next video. Thank you very much for listening. Hope you have a great day. Take care.